and I'm with KaLeigh Long for the second interview. This one is on the business end of Westwind. It's really about Westwind this time. The last interview we talked about KaLeigh and her history and her story and where she comes from, and now we're talking more about the business. And we have some questions from the people in the group. I have some of my own to start with. So the one of the concerns, one of the things that I'm just really curious about is the stability and staying power of Westwind. What does your structure look like?
Yeah.
And as far as your investments, can you, do you have enough to finish the pilot program at this point and things like that? I'll just kind of lay that out there and let you talk about it.
Yeah, so we've raised a little over $50 million, and that fully funds the pilot and our pilot plant operations for a while.
Okay.
And then furthermore, we're looking at adding in what we're going to be calling like a specialty products division within the pilot plant, so that we can hopefully start producing actual sellable niche metal, high purity metal products next year, if not a little sooner. And so right now we're on track to commission that pilot plant end of Q1 of this year. But again, something really unique about our technology is that we can do nickel vapor deposition. So we can do high purity nickel coatings. And that's really valuable to aerospace and defense industries for nickel coated carbon fibers, nickel coated graphite, and the list goes on. And so the pilot plant that we are currently building in Lawton is a business in and of itself. And it's also critical to a disciplined scale up before we build the commercial. But I think we are certainly there to stay.
Last time they had trouble hearing us, and I forgot to bring the mic, so I've got to remind myself to speak up.
Okay, I'll try.
And I know your voice is a little bit, but so what about the investors? Have they like what's the term of investing that they have? Like, can they just pull their money out at any time, or how does that look?
Yeah, technically I don't think that they can. However, we have made rescissions offers. I don't want to hold anyone hostage. I want people to invest because they want to invest,
right,
not hold that over them. But I mean, the Series A is closed. Those funds are already wired. Many of those funds are being spent on the construction of the pilot plant, and we don't have any investors that are requesting their money back, and
so
I don't foresee that.
They're in it for
happening.
the long haul.
Yeah, so
Okay.
it's not, they didn't loan us money. We have one seed investor that loaned us money, and then we have another, it's a partner group that loaned us money to convert into equity, and I think that conversion, it either has happened or it will happen. Everybody else was a strict investment.
And do your investors, have they, or current or potential investors, do you have any commitments going forward after the pilot plant is finished?
Yeah, we have received commitments, but that we don't count on commitments.
Okay.
We have strong indication from some pretty heavy hitters like investment banks and larger private equity groups.
Okay.
And then also several of our potential customers have VC funds or private equity funds. And it's been pretty strongly indicated to us that once we complete our bankable feasibility study and produce samples that meet spec out of our pilot plant, that we should be walking into a pretty well-funded Series B. So we're actually pre-selling the Series B now.
Okay.
And we actually recently finished our first round of applications for the DOE for a $180 million grant. And then we're applying for a $180 million loan from DOD, an additional $80 million grant from DOD.
Oh, wow.
So, and so far those applications and conversations are progressing a lot quicker than we thought they would. I so apologize.
That's okay.
So.
So that kind of ties in. I scrolled down. I should have done a better job of organizing this, but there's a question from Greg. I hope it's okay if I use people's names. I should have asked. But Greg wanted to ask about taking, if you're an advocate of the free market, and you're taking money from the city of Lawton, which you've taken a loan from the city of Lawton. Is that right?
Yeah, so for the pilot plant, we took a $3 million loan, and that loan can only be used on the shell of the building. And if we do not make the full extent of our capital investment, of which I think we've already nearly made, I think we committed to spending over $15 million on the pilot plant. Well, between CapEx and OpEx, we're going to hit $29 million on the pilot plant. So, and then we have to deliver, I think it's 85 jobs, and we're on track to do that. If we meet those benchmarks, then that loan would convert into a grant.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah.
See, yeah, so the city, my understanding was that it was a loan. There's been a lot of confusion about it.
Yeah.
That people have said that it's a grant, people have called it a loan, but it's a loan that will be basically forgiven if certain points are met.
Yeah.
And the question is, concerning that, is why is it necessary to get government involved? Why couldn't you start off taking loans from banks in the first place?
Yeah. Well, we did start off with private funding. So we raised $20 million in our Series A. I think we raised about $9 million in our seed round. So, and the lion's share of our capital will likely be private. The reason why that government funding is necessary for this project is because we're not competing with business against business. And we are in a business that is critical to national security, defense, and energy. And so it is Westwind competing against the entirety of the PRC, People's Republic of China, and against Russia and other foreign entities of concern. So it's our private capital against state capital. And when the Pentagon had to stop deliveries of F-35 fighter jets about 18 months ago, when we no longer can access many rare earths, China is full out banned germanium and gallium. And when China took over and just not too long ago bought the London Metals Exchange and is trying to soak up and buy up raw material for their strategic reserves, I think anticipating a coming rising geopolitical tensions, at that point, for the private market in the United States to satisfy the national security needs, there has to be an element of competitiveness from state to state. And that's why, we're not another cattle operation or tech company. And if we fail, not only is it harmful to our investors, to the Lawton community, and for our business, but it's harmful for the interests of the United States. And there has to be some sort of element of equal competition. And still there is a private reliance that China doesn't have. A lot of these metals companies that are they're throwing them up at rapid paces in Indonesia, China is, and in China, they're largely state-owned,
Gotcha.
There's still a significant private cost share at Westwind.
So let me go back down here. And given Greg's questions here, he also asked why it had to be in that location. I think
Right on the guidance of Lawton for that, it is an established industrial park.
Right.
And so in terms of permitting and zoning and infrastructure, my understanding is that Lawton wanted to contain the industrial industries within their industrial park. And I feel confident that we'll actually be the cleanest operation there, above many other industries. Our emissions are low. And again, we're not an operation that's largely, we don't have tailings and to the extent that a lot of industrial environments would, or smoke and chimneys. We're vaporizing metal, so it's very sophisticated tech. We went with a more expensive process because it's cleaner and because it's more elite in the terms of purity levels that it produces. So that's why we followed Lawton's direction on wanting us to be contained within the industrial park.
Nice. How interesting. Okay, so another question, I think this one is one of mine, but I'm sure other people want to know too. Have you filed?
and several permits around the different pieces of this pilot plant.
Mm-hmm.
We filed our notice of determination with the DEQ. They came back and they've had multiple conversations with our technical team and engineers. I think they've seen proprietary information about our flow sheets, our mass balances, inputs, outputs, and they've come back that the only thing that they wanted us to permit for this pilot plant was the generator. Again, our CO2 emissions are incredibly low, and there's zero solid toxic waste in the pilot plant.
Okay.
You know, you're taking a mixed hydroxide precipitates, a variety of metals that are organic to nature. You know, these aren't like chemicals, and you're vaporizing the nickel. You're leaving behind the cobalt and the manganese, and then we plan to sell that cobalt and manganese. There's no solid waste stream there, so we're not trying to get exemptions. It's just our outputs. We don't have large CO outputs.
Okay.
You know, we don't have any solid toxic waste. So
Larry wanted to know if you could talk about you and your former general counsel parting ways last year. Can you speak on that at all?
Yeah, so I mean, this company is growing very quickly, and as we grow, we require more senior qualified talent. So we decided to go another direction. We hired a longstanding Oklahoman, somebody that I felt like I could trust. Her name is KaLeigh Masters. She's won a case before the Supreme Court. She's incredibly distinguished, well established, had a good reputation, seemed to be very honest. She's former Miss Oklahoma, just a very good woman, and there was a lot of cultural alignment there, and her qualifications were extraordinary. Your general counsel is someone that you have to rely on to cross every T and dot every I. Mm-hmm. And I just felt that KaLeigh, under every circumstance, would tell me the truth and would tell others the truth.
Oh.
And she was an incredibly qualified applicant. So
okay.
Yeah, the board promoted KaLeigh.
I see. Oh, so she was already a part of the team and got promoted?
She so when we first met her, she was helping us raise money, and she was supporting as kind of like a part-time attorney, and she was supporting our general counsel, but it became clear that KaLeigh was very talented and deserved that
okay.
promotion. Yeah.
And then you had another partnership with a firm, and they were supposed to be involved in part of the process.
Yeah.
And they're no longer with you. And I think that was
Yeah.
why the Lawton deal went from 12 million to 3 initially?
Yeah. Well, so Lawton has committed the remainder of that 12 million for the commercial plant if we build
okay.
a commercial there. So I had been interviewing many engineering firms and different engineers. When I had first started the company, I interviewed, I wanted to go with the vaporization tech because I thought it was the cleanest. I interviewed a small R&D firm out of Canada, and I wanted to see what they could do. They did make promises, and I paid them to produce a engineering study, and they failed to deliver that. And so and where I was wrong is I should have been able to discern their failure to deliver before I hired them and paid them to deliver. So that was a mistake that I made, along with others on my team, but I led them there. Mm-hmm. Quickly, once we discovered the technical failure, we reported to the board, our investors, and we've decided that from now on we're only hiring major firms, many of them that will give process guarantees. So we've engaged Medso, which is a very large engineering firm, gives a process guarantee, so has to work. Did a thorough job vetting them. And then we're also working with Atkins Realis. And then on top of that, I made the decision to really stack out our internal team with internal engineers. So I was contracting a lot of engineering work, and we're not doing that anymore. We're, if we think an engineer's competent in our technology, then we bring them in-house. So
So basically, they just couldn't deliver.
Yeah, they
Okay.
just didn't deliver. Yeah.
And then there's a question about a Dennis Muhlenberg.
Yeah.
And they're asking about his work
Yeah.
history and maybe some safety issues, and they want to know about his involvement in your program.
Yeah. You know, I will say Dennis gets a lot of hate. You know, if you Google him, it's extraordinary. Netflix did a documentary on him.
Wow.
And he was the CEO of Boeing, and he was the CEO of Boeing during the 2 tragic plane crashes that killed hundreds of people.
Mm.
And so he was with Boeing for, I think it was nearly 30 years. So he started at Boeing as an intern and went from intern to CEO. And Dennis came to Westwind by way of investment. He knows the critical metals story. He knew how bad Boeing and these other aerospace companies are suffering for lack of U.S. material. And so he invested in the company. I got to know him, and I wanted to learn from somebody who made a mistake, and to know how not to do that. And one thing that Dennis did, there was also stuff that Dennis has accomplished beyond his mistakes, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And in my opinion, in my experience, he's been a very compassionate businessman. I do learn from him. I respect him. Now, his role at Westwind has been more on selling our material. He's a member of our board.
Mm-hmm.
He's not involved in health, safety, and environment.
Okay.
We have major audits around HSE, environmental impact analysis. Dennis plays no role in any of that. And if anything, what we're learning is, in an ethos at Westwind, is to let the technical experts be those experts and lead. Let the HSE experts lead and make decisions. So we have that health, safety, and technical representation on our board,
Mm-hmm.
you know.
Yeah.
And so I think I can say that I don't know of anything more that Westwind could do to prioritize that health,
Mm-hmm.
safety, environment. And our technical team has worked collectively for about 250 years in these same types of plants with zero impact to communities. We know of 3 fatalities under the tenure of our technical leadership. One was an operator fell off of a loft,
Mm-hmm.
tragically. Another one was it was human failure. An operator did not put a cap back on like a pipe, and an individual, another operator, was killed by that pipe.
Mm.
And then the other one was there was an operator changing a valve on a carbonyl pipe, and he took the liquid carbonyl and he had to sneeze and he wiped his face
Yeah,
with it.
we've heard about that guy.
And so traditionally he could have been given antabuse and there would likely have been no side effects, but he didn't know that. It didn't register with him that he was sick because of that exposure, because he had a cold or a flu.
Mm.
And he eventually died days later, tragically. But with those, we've even taken further mitigation on how do we keep that from happening. Okay, so sorry, I'll hurt. But so all that to say is, like, I'm not going to bash Dennis. I'm very grateful for him, and I think he has learned, and I've learned, to how better can we improve health, safety? How better can we hold our engineers accountable, ourselves accountable? And that's my nature of engagement with Dennis.
Can I ask one more question?
Yeah.
I'm going to pick out here. We're out of time. It is what it is. But there's one question here about, gosh, I don't know if I can find it. So I can remember it. Basically, it was asking, because of free trade agreements, you won't be competing against Chinese cobalt. You'll be competing against British and Canadian.
Well, Canada is a competitor. Yeah.
Okay.
They will be, and the industry is starting to boom in Canada too.
Mm.
And the UK not so much, because they don't meet domestic qualifications. So in the IRA, not only does it have to be free to foreign entity of concern, namely China, Russia, but it also has to be domestic. So there's domestic thresholds. 100% of components have to be made in domestically, and 80% of raw material value add has to be made domestically. Why Canada is
got one more definitely that we want to do
Yeah.
and discuss the process and
Yeah.
cover all the safety concerns. And so thanks for joining with me. Are we off? I guess goodbye
Thank
first,
you.
and we'll turn it off.